All right. Well, we had some more news break last night. Joe Biden gave his farewell address to the nation. That was all the talk last night. The country's
Hmm.
eyes were glued to their televisions, awaiting the final words of wisdom, the last pearls from Joe Biden. So go ahead, take it away.
All right. So he started off playing the classics.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Everyone got a little teary-eyed to hear him reminiscing about Corn Pop once
Right.
more. But then he went on, and it rapidly went downhill from there. So just for fun, one last time he decided to read the directions off the teleprompter. Joe Biden said, end of quote, off the teleprompter in his farewell address. That about sums up his presidency.
Well addressed, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote.
End of quote.
End of quote. I like that comic, Stephen Wright, the very deadpan comic. One of his jokes
Yeah.
is, I wish my first word as a baby was quote, because then my last word on my deathbed could be unquote.
Unquote. Okay, so on a more serious note, this is Kaneko the Great sums it up pretty well. Biden goes on to lament a lot of things that he could have talked about when he was the president. Apparently, he has a real issue with wealth and oligarchy all of a sudden. All of a sudden, these things bother him. So let's see what he said, because he summed it up very well. In his farewell address, President Joe Biden warns the nation about the dangers of an ultra-wealthy oligarchy that must pay their fair share of taxes. You don't say. However, just weeks ago, Biden granted his son Hunter an unprecedented decade-long pardon, shielding him from tax fraud charges. 6 major banks, including JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo, filed over 170 suspicious activity reports with the Treasury Department alleging the Biden family's involvement in money laundering, human trafficking, and tax fraud. Congressional investigations uncovered that foreign funds from Russia, China, and Ukraine were funneled through 20 Biden-linked shell companies before being distributed to 9 Biden family members, including a grandchild. Not the one he doesn't acknowledge, a different one. None of
His
the
on the books
Bidens,
grandchild.
yeah, not the strippers kid. None of the Bidens registered under the Foreign Agent Registration Act as required by law. In other words, the Biden family, who live by their own set of rules and avoid paying their fair share of taxes, are the very ultra-wealthy oligarchs President Biden warns the nation about. All right, so let's hear his rousing Mr. Smith Goes to Washington-esque speech here.
I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern.
Is that so?
This is a
His name is James. He's my brother.
dangerous concentration, and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. And the dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before, more than a century ago. But the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. And we've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules, pay their fair share of taxes.
We would have done more, but there's this parliamentarian. And
Yeah.
the parliamentarian kept voting against. I was going to do a whole New Deal thing, guys. I was going to do universal basic income. Parliamentarian, she's like one of those Safak lemurs. She goes sideways when you try to bring her a policy. Well, this is a very funny thing because I want you to all go back to the olden times. It was called the summer of 2024 in the Democratic Convention. So let's see what the Democratic Convention had to say about oligarchy.
Trump thinks that we should trust him on the economy because he claims to be very rich. But take it from an actual billionaire.
Look at them. They love it. They love
Trump
it.
is rich in only one thing: stupidity.
Look at these people out there on the floor in the middle of a genocide. I saw a lot of these people at the end of the convention because we threw up the footage I had of that. A lot of these people coming from the convention with the protesters trying to confront them about the support for this regime. They thought that was hilarious. They thought it was hilarious when Pritzker pointed out that he's a real billionaire. But this is, according to Biden, this is the party that is fighting the billionaires. Fighting the billionaires.
Also, I just want to point out one thing because, he mentioned, how 100 years ago, workers took on the robber barons. And, I have this book on display in my bookcase. Maybe one day we'll do a whole episode on the Ludlow massacre because this was about the time he's talking about. This was 1914, right? It was one of the first real labor actions that turned violent at the hands of the Rockefeller family. And I recall all throughout this book reading over and over again that those coal workers were like, now we don't want to punish the Rockefellers. We don't want to punish the wealthy. We just want them to pay their fair share. Yeah. They said that over and over again throughout this book.
Yeah.
No, we're not out to punish success. That's true. That's true. The workers back then, they were very, very considerate of the robber barons. We don't want to punish them.
Mattawan. Yeah,
Right.
They were very, very careful about that.
Yeah.
And also,
I think it's time for you to start to seriously consider salads.
Yeah, that's the other thing. This guy. And I eat seed oils 3 meals a day and look at me. It's another thing that's bullshit. About MAGA and Donald Trump.
So, but he wasn't done. He wasn't done. You got to love it. To be fair, he's not the first one to do this. To all of a sudden become very concerned about issues that, he might have shown some concern about when he was actually the president. All of a sudden, they're very concerned about these things when they have no power to do anything about them. So here he is calling for an end to dark money, term limits on Supreme Court justices, which he emphatically rejected, if you remember, the idea of altering in any way the Supreme Court justice rules. A ban on stock trading. That's probably just because he's mad at Nancy for pushing him out. That's particularly, he's going to call that the Pelosi Stock Trading Act. All right, so let's see him stumble through this.
We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year time limit, term limit, time and term for the strongest ethics and the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress.
I mean, seriously, you've been president for 4 years. Where do you get the balls to sit there with this list of things that somebody should do?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it's just incredible.
From trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune.
Like there was literally a big media firestorm around trading stock in Congress, and where Nancy Pelosi said, yeah, that's the free market, and I think everyone should be able to participate. He didn't say a fucking word. Didn't say a word. You didn't even weigh in on the subject.
Yeah, I mean,
now he wants to talk about it.
I'm sure he didn't get to this in the speech, but another just totally egregious example of this exact kind of thing is days ago removing Cuba from the state sponsor of terrorism list.
Right.
When you
Right.
could have done that, and you know, being
could have done that as soon as you came in.
right. If you did that as soon as you came in, they'd have a 4-year respite from the kind of sanctions and sort of diplomatic and economic penalties that come with being included on that list. It's not just a symbolic thing. Like, it actually materially hurts the Cuban people to be wrongfully put on that list for obviously no fucking reason. He could have done that as soon as he took office, and then they'd have had a 4-year break from that designation, because as soon as Donald Trump sets foot back in office with fucking Marco Rubio as his Secretary of State, he's going to put him right back on. So he could have given him a 4-year break from that. Instead, he gives him, 3 weeks?
From crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you had no problem abusing that power to pardon your son. Now, I gotta say, as we'll see in my Louisiana segment, most of the conservative commentators, certainly in corporate media, are just the bizarro world counterpart of the MSNBC level of stupidity and moronic commentary. I gotta say, Scott Jennings on CNN is pretty damn good. He's pretty good at what he does. So I actually grabbed his quote. And what's really funny about it is the DNC shill trying to say that the problem is messaging. It's really just messaging.
I think the way he's leaving office has been, frankly, pretty terrible. He's going to be remembered for a few things. But politically, it's mostly for when he was vice president, he and Obama sort of ushering in the Trump era initially, and then as he's leaving office as president, bringing back Trump and Trumpism stronger and more popular than ever. Today, Biden has like a 61% disapproval, and Trump is over a 50% approval and more popular, and his ideology is more popular than it's ever been. If everything you say is true, the Democrats should have had no trouble getting reelected in this election, yet they were.
It's an issue of a communications failure.
I know, and for Democrats, it's always been about communication and no introspection about the policies that led to him leaving office as one of the most unpopular presidents. When I watch this tonight, I remain astonished that he, his family, and other people around him thought he could ever run for another term. I mean, there's no way he could serve another 6 months, let alone another 4 years. The fact that they pursued that farce for as long as they did, to me, remains one of the most astonishing things about this term. So,
where's the lie?
Nope.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Absolutely.
So there you go. Here's the poll he's referencing, and it's a CNN poll. 61% believe Joe Biden's presidency was a failure. Only 38% consider it a success. There's Cat Turd, friend of show Cat Turd, worst president in history. I like that. Dip Shitler.
Yeah.
Ultra MAGA Kelly, goodbye, slobbering, senile Joe Biden, the worst president ever. No one will miss this thing except Joy Behar. This worst president is trending on Twitter, by the way. Danielle, we've been feeling the full impact of your administration for 4 years. I hope you go down in the dustbin of history as the worst fucking president ever. Bye. So it sounds like she might agree with you that he gave George W. a run for his money. I do think he is going to go down in history as one of the worst presidents in history. I think there's recency bias, who remembers Tyler now, right? Like, there have been a lot of awful presidents. But in modern times, certainly among post-war presidents, he can make a strong claim for the title of worst president in the post-war era.
Yeah, and look, the imperial era is, to me, the most appropriate era to think about who the worst president is, because they were in the position to do the worst damage once we became the global hegemon, which, we were not under President Tyler, right? Now, in terms of George W. Bush, I don't mean to, nitpick Cat Turd, but George W. Bush left office with a 22% favorability rating, so it was much, much lower. And I think a big reason for that is because, by 2008, even half of the Republicans had realized what a horrible mistake the Iraq War was.
Right.
Whereas half of the Republicans do not cry tears for Gaza. Like they do not feel as strongly about this genocide as some of them felt about the Iraq War. So that's what really tanked Bush's numbers.
Right,
Is half
right.
of his own party was like, okay, this guy was a
And
fucking
Katrina.
nightmare.
Yeah.
And Katrina, yeah, exactly. So he had lost like half of his own party. As you can see there, Biden has retained the diehard libs, which make up about 34% of the population. And then God knows who else is saying they have a favorable view of him. But yeah, he has his libs. So that's why his numbers are as high as they are, which in my opinion are shockingly high. But as we have mentioned earlier in this show and many times throughout the past several years, they're just the most brainwashed people in America. And so it's hard to fall below 35% as a Democrat or as a Republican for that matter now, because things are more polarized generally. But yeah, no, I mean, it was an absolute horror show, in every single respect. He really does, in my opinion, give Bush a run for his money.
Yeah, I mean, it's partly his policies. It's partly that his presidency coincided with peak liberal social engineering ideology. So we're going to remember it for that, even though he went along with it. He didn't really understand it. Yeah. Let's have a transgender dance party on the lawn. What do you mean they got their tits out? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Shut it down. Like, he didn't know what the fuck was going on. Like, he definitely went along with it. He tried to do these Title IX revisions and that kind of thing. But did he actually understand that, or was he just trying to be popular? I mean, that's something to indict him for as well, not thinking it through. But his presidency came at the moment of peak woke. So that's another thing that he didn't tell movie studios what movies to make. But when people think of his era, they're going to think of this cultural period where there was just all this dreck and this attempt to tell people how to think and how to live. Like, everything people hate about this liberal project that's been brewing and building really since Clinton came in and eliminated economics and class as a part of the conversation among liberals, so that everything became about identity. The contradictions and the emptiness of that kind of politics really peaked during the Biden years.
Yes.
And that, in addition to just his policy failures on Ukraine, on Israel, on the economy, breaking the railroad union, part of what he's going to be remembered for, because he was there at that moment, is going to be peak woke liberal ideology and what it was like to live through call out culture and cancel culture and all this shit that the vast majority of people hated, that is very quickly now coming to an end with Mark Zuckerberg like one day away from endorsing Black Forest supplements.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well said. Good point, Charles.
Please clap.